Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my class, my photography digital class for secondary education. These are my standards, understanding the elements and principles of design and composition. I want to revisit this subject right here, is how to communicate better compositions in our photograph. That's when my students had problems, and I want to revisit again and demonstrate through the rule of thirds how we can accomplish these better compositions for better stories in our photographs. Composition, all these elements right here, how we can arrange in the viewfinder to give weight to some elements that are more important and make the viewer navigate the rest of the photograph. The rule of thirds. The rule of thirds are very important. The rule of thirds works. A lot of photographers, cinematographers, they're still using the rule of thirds. Very much the rule of thirds is a set of guidelines, agreed, the photographers and cinematographers used to give weight to more important subjects so the viewer can focus on that subject, but then navigate into another subjects through the whole story inside of the frame, inside of the photograph, inside of the cinematic experience. This is the rule of thirds. Those are the grids that divide the frame into 9 spaces. This division of grids help us to arrange these elements into the frame so it gives us balance, better composition, more creative photographs, creating a story. In this example, this grid right here, in these 3 spaces, the photographer decided to put all the weight in the most important elements right here. But first of all, catching the eye with the seashell. But notice this line right here first travels, then captures the image right here with the seashell, and then the eyes goes all the way following the line to the sunset. Right after, the eye navigates the whole photograph all the way around. So the rule of thirds is a guidelines for our photographers, for cinematographers again, to help them to rearrange all these important elements to create this story and balance in their photographs to make more sense, more interesting. These settings we can find in our SLR4 camera right here, and this button is the setting button. Then we can navigate it. We can go and find the grid display and then turn it on. You'll find these different settings for different grids, but don't pay attention to these grids right here. I don't want you to focus on that. Please do the setting in this. This is the rule of thirds. After you have the setting, your camera will look like this in the viewfinder. And then when you're ready to take a photograph, the grids automatically will appear right here. Those are guidelines, again, to help you to rearrange your focal point of view, your most important subjects to create balance in your photograph, like right here. The subject is right here, creating this space, but at the same time, making blurry and looking through the distance right here. But the main focal point right here is this soldier, and then forces the viewer to navigate the rest of the photograph. The iPhones or iPads. If you go into the regular settings, go to the camera settings, and then you find the grid, turn it on, and automatically you will find the rule of thirds with the grids right here. It's very important for you if you don't have a SLR camera. You can use your phone, your iPad. Sometimes, some people have difficulties holding the heavy camera and with a heavy lens, or sometimes we don't have money to afford a camera, but the phone and iPad is okay. Sometimes we have difficulty with motor skills to hold the whole camera with SLR, but the iPhone or the iPad is easier to hold it, and it's more user friendly. So for me, I mentioned before in my class, the camera, the iPhone, the lenses, the fancy cameras, they're just tools, but the most important is how the photographer uses these tools to create interesting stories through the photographs. This is the way it looks on your iPhone, right with the grid. In this case, the photograph decide to keep balance in this grid with these subjects, and then force the viewer to navigate the rest of the landscape. You notice right here in this line, in this set of 3 spaces, the photographer actually create this exact line to create this landscape for a horizon. This line right here, usually photographers use for horizons, for landscapes, and it really, really works. It makes the photographer photographs more interesting, like the way we see in this example. This is a better example with your phone, with the guidelines already. This photographer placed this most important element in these third lines, and then create a horizon for the rest of the city, create the viewer, focus on this, and then explore the rest of the photograph. This is really interesting. Me, when I was a young photographer, and some photographers, they still use this technique. It's very quick. For some of you who have problems with really busy environments, they don't know where to focus, you can use your hands, your fingers, almost simulating a grid, almost simulating a viewfinder from your camera or your iPhone. That way, you can explore the environment. If it's very busy, you can go around, and when you find something interesting, you stop, you put your camera, your iPhone, and then take the shot. Before take the shot, again, it's important to follow the rule of thirds, the grid. The grid is very important because it really works to create balance, to create harmony, to create the story in your photographs. In this case, after we explore a viewfinder, we explore the guidelines before we take a photograph. We decide where our most important elements we're going to place in this grid. In this case, the photographer decides to push this most important element to the side. This really works for portraiture. Why? Because if we place the subject right here in the center, sometimes our eyes focus in this empty space on the side, and it's better to focus right here. There's nothing to focus on the side. You just go straight to the gaze of the subject. And then sometimes we create this space because in advertisement and commercial photography, some companies, they add text right here, text for advertisement. In this case right here is cinematography. If you notice it, rule of thirds again. Why? It creates in this grid the most important subject, that is the main character, then makes the viewer navigate in the middle ground, the environment, and then goes to the back to this character that is very interesting. Rule of thirds again. This environment is very busy, so the photographer decides to push the characters on the side. Same thing right here. And then focus the viewer in these two subjects. Then through these beautiful flowers in yellow, focus the viewer to explore and navigate the rest of the photograph without interfere with this busyness right here in this landscape. This is the focal point of view. This is another example, a landscape. Again, rule of thirds. You notice it right here, using the square, the spaces, the horizon line right here, all the way right here. Then goes into the main focal point of view, the tree. Then the tree forces the viewer to go to the mountain to have a conversation. It's almost like having a conversation between the tree and the mountain. But again, rule of thirds on the bottom for the horizon, then focus the main subject here in this line of thirds, and then look to the other subject, focus on the opposite side, having a conversation, having balance, creating a story through the whole photograph. Composition in the creative side of photography. We can accomplish with the rule of thirds. Rule of thirds, rule of thirds. Rule of thirds, it really works. Look right here in the shot. Line to line, 2, 3. Excuse me. And the photographer focus right here in this character, in this rule of thirds right here. And then in the center, your eye travels to this color to explore the costumes of the musicians because they're really interesting, and then goes all the way down to this musical instrument. So the rule of thirds apply right here in these elements. Same thing right here. This landscape. Rule of thirds right here in these 3 lines. Then the horizon right here on the bottom. Then the main focus. Then the eye explores the rest of the photograph. Same thing right here. Rule of thirds. Rule of thirds. The center is the focal point in these lines, and then forces the viewer to navigate the rest of the photograph. Same thing right here. This is really interesting. This is when you can apply your fingers, because if you notice it right here, This is a very busy environment, busy scene. So the photographer didn't know what to catch, and when the photographer seen something interesting, right away take the camera and take the photograph. And then on this side, you can use your fingers, to see the busy environment, and you see something, if you notice that something interesting, stop, take the camera, go to the viewfinder, check the lines, grids, rule of thirds, place your subjects and the elements most important to create balance, in this case right here, in this line right here, rule of thirds. And then at the same time, when the photograph is done, it forces the viewer to navigate the rest of the photograph, creating the story. But this is the focal point. And this side, in this section, in these three squares, in this rule of thirds, in this grid. Okay, so the subject is really interesting, focus on that, and then navigates to the rest of the squares. I know we went over this assignment, and again, I want to revisit because some of you have problems understanding composition, and the best way for me to understand composition is the rule of thirds. I demonstrate how you can accomplish that using the rule of thirds. Rule of thirds works. So I want you to redo this assignment. It's a little bit different because in this case, I want you to focus on one photograph, but I want you to print it. And I want you to send me digital files as well. And I want one photograph of the same, one without the grid, and one with the grid, because I want to know how you rearrange or how you arrange your elements to create this balance, to create this interesting photograph. What is the main focal subject, like in this case? This line right here, here in the horizon, and then in these lines right here, in these squares, the main focal point of view, and then negative space right here. But if you notice it, first of all, divide the landscape, then the main subject. And then it seems like it's not too interesting because it is very simple. But if you notice that the deer is looking through somewhere right here, and that's what this photograph creates, this interesting part of the story. So the viewer is looking at the landscape horizon, and then the subject, and then goes right here, and then explores the rest of the sky. So today is Thursday. You have until next Thursday to send me these photographs, these files, but by Monday, next Monday or Tuesday, I want to see files. I want to see what you're doing. I want to give you a feedback. I want to have a conversation. I want you to help you to understand how to create balance with the rule of thirds, with these grids. So send me files. I want to see those files, and then we'll have a presentation on Thursday. So that's one of the main reasons I want to see these photographs. One without, then we present with these grids so you can explain why you take these decisions to arrange these elements in this rule of thirds and this grid to create interesting photographs, to create balance in your photograph, to create better composition. Also, I have these extra resources. I'm going to send an email to your personal email in school, and I want you to watch this video and this article. The video is really short, it's like 3 or 4 minutes. So I really recommend for you to watch it. It will help you more with your skills and how to accomplish better this technique with the rule of thirds. Same thing with the article, is very short, it's like 3 or 4 minutes, and has a lot of photographs. The photographs have explanation. The explanations are very short, but they're very, very interesting, very, very, very important for this assignment. So look at it. If you have any questions, please send me emails. I want questions. I want to have this conversation. I want to have this conversation because I want you to understand the rule of thirds, for you to create better stories, to create better photographs, better compositions. Please send me an emails, and thank you so much.